The Enfield Monster. In 1973, a man in Enfield, Illinois told reporters that he saw a weird little creature lurking in his yard. Per the Mount Vernon Register News, resident Henry McDaniel stated it had 3 legs on it, a short body, 2 little short arms, and 2 pink eyes as big as flashlights. It was the kind of night when the silence felt too quiet. The wind refused to blow. The insects had gone still, and the small town of Enfield, Illinois, seemed trapped in a breathless pause. On April 25th, 1973, around 9:30 p.m., a man named Henry McDaniel sat in his modest home just off Route 1. He was reading by lamplight, the static buzz of a distant radio filling the background, when a strange scratching began at the front door. It wasn't just a tap. It was a deep, deliberate clawing, like something with a strength and purpose. Henry froze, his dog growling low, backed into a corner. Grabbing his pistol, Henry crept to the door, heart hammering. He flung it open, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. Standing on his front porch was a creature that defied explanation. It wasn't a man, it wasn't an animal, it was something else. It stood nearly 5 feet tall, grey-skinned, with large glowing pink eyes, set deep into its face. Its arms were short, ending in 3 fingers, tipped with sharp claws. But the most terrifying part? It had 3 legs, and it wasn't walking. It was hopping, like a kangaroo. Henry fired. The creature let out a high-pitched screech and bounded away in massive 50-foot leaps, disappearing into the darkness like it had never been there. But it had been, because when the authorities arrived, they found the footprints. 3-toed, deep, impossibly spaced, and no one could explain them. The footprints that shouldn't exist? The sheriff didn't want to believe it. Strange footprints, alien creatures. It sounded like the kind of tale a drunk man might spin on a lonely night. But Henry McDaniel wasn't drunk. He was calm, firm, and visibly shaken. And those footprints, they were real. 3 deep impressions in the soft ground just outside Henry's front door. Each print was over 4 inches wide, shaped like a clawed bird's foot, but heavier, like something far bigger had left them. Even more disturbing? The spacing. Each print was nearly 30 to 40 feet apart, as if whatever made them was leaping enormous distances. An investigator from the Illinois State Police bent down, ran his fingers over the edge of one. "No known animal around here could leave this," he whispered. Reporters caught wind fast. The next day, the Enfield newspaper ran the headline, "Local man claims monster attack. Authorities find strange tracks." Locals were divided. Some laughed it off. Others kept their kids indoors. But the fear turned real again that very night. Just after midnight, a young boy, Greg Garrett, who lived behind the McDaniel, ran screaming into his house. He said a grey creature with red eyes had come out of the bushes while he was playing in the yard. It had stomped on his feet with such force that it tore his shoes. And just like with Henry, the creature hopped away. Word spread like wildfire. And deep in the heart of rural Illinois, a terrifying thought began to take hold. Something was stalking Enfield. And it wasn't done yet. The creature returns. The town of Enfield had never known real fear. It was the kind of place where everyone left their doors unlocked, where gossip spread faster than the evening train, and where nothing ever happened until now. After Henry McDaniel's report and young Greg Garrett's chilling encounter, the whispers turned to warnings. Farmers started double-checking their barn locks, mothers kept their children indoors, and the local sheriff, he just wanted the whole thing to go away. But it wouldn't, because 2 nights later, the Enfield monster came back. Henry had barely begun to settle down again. He'd convinced himself it was over, that maybe it had all been some strange hallucination, some trick of light and adrenaline, until he heard that same sound again, a slow scraping claw across the siding of his house. This time he didn't wait. He rushed to the window, and there it was again, that same twisted, unnatural figure just outside, pink eyes glowing like burning coals in the dark. The skin was slick, almost reptilian, and shimmered slightly in the moonlight. But it wasn't just standing there, it was watching him. Not like an animal, not even like a man, but like something that understood, something that was curious, calculating. Henry lifted his gun, and just as his finger reached the trigger, the creature moved, not ran, jumped. In one fluid, impossible leap, it vanished into the darkness behind his barn. He fired anyway, two shots echoing through the still night. But he knew it was useless. It moved too fast. When officers arrived again, they found more of the strange three-toed prints, this time on top of Henry's storm cellar, as if the creature had landed there mid-leap. They also found something else. Deep gouges in the metal siding, long curved scratches, like claws, had been dragged across it with incredible force. This was no prank, no hoax. Whatever had come to Enfield wasn't just visiting anymore. It was studying, and it was getting bolder. The town begins to break. By the third sighting, Enfield was no longer just a quiet farming town. It had become the center of something strange, something unnatural. Fear, once a whisper in the background, now echoed loudly in every home, every school hallway, every hushed conversation at the gas station. People who used to laugh off the stories now locked their doors at sundown. They closed their blinds tight. The sun still rose and fell like normal, but for the people of Enfield, normal was gone. Sheriff Roy Pruitt was overwhelmed. He didn't believe in monsters, but the calls kept coming in. That week alone, his office received over a dozen reports. Strange noises, glowing eyes in the woods, barns being ransacked, pets gone missing. In one instance, a farmer claimed something had torn open the door of his chicken coop, a door reinforced with steel latches, and left behind only a pool of feathers and three massive claw-shaped imprints in the mud. But it wasn't just physical damage that shook people, it was what wasn't found. No blood trails, no broken fences, no sign of struggle, like the creature just took what it wanted and vanished into the night. Then came the night of the search party. Fueled by fear and frustration, a group of armed locals, young men in their 20s, a few older farmers, and even a school teacher, gathered just outside Henry McDaniel's property. Flashlights, rifles, and a deep desire for answers led them into the surrounding woods. At first, the forest was still, too still. Even the frogs and crickets were silent. Then, one of the men, a teen named Darrell, called out. He'd seen something tall, something fast. Before anyone could react, a crashing sound came from deeper in the woods. Branches breaking, bushes shaking, something big moving rapidly through the underbrush. They chased after it, flashlights bouncing, hearts pounding, until they came to a clearing. There, in the center of the clearing, they saw them. Footprints, massive three-toed impressions stamped deep into the soft earth, leading up to the base of a tree. But the prints didn't continue. There were no return tracks, no signs of movement beyond that point. It was like the creature had simply disappeared, vanished into thin air. One of the men, pale and trembling, whispered, "It didn't run. It flew. Or something took it." Silence fell. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Because for the first time they realized they weren't hunting it. It was luring them. And it might be closer than they thought. The government arrives. 3 days after the failed search party, Enfield changed again. This time it wasn't the creature that brought the shift, but something far more unexpected. Black cars, military trucks, men in suits. They rolled into town without warning, no press, no announcements, just quiet authority. Locals saw them talking to the sheriff behind closed doors. Then they were seen pacing around Henry McDaniel's house, examining the storm cellar, measuring the distance between footprints still visible in the soft dirt, and then they started taking things. One of the local boys, Tommy Harris, saw two of the men hauling off pieces of Henry's siding, the same metal that had been slashed by the creature's claws. They placed it in a sealed crate and marked it with bold black letters, classified. The town had seen UFO stories on the news before, Roswell, lights in the sky, but nothing had ever come here. Not like this. And then came the whispers. Henry McDaniel had been visited twice. The first visit was brief. Two plain-clothed men claiming to be from a wildlife research unit. They asked questions, lots of them. They weren't writing anything down, but they remembered everything. They asked about the creature's eyes, its skin, its movements, and, strangely, about its smell. The second visit was stranger. They didn't knock. They just appeared. Henry described them later as looking off. Like they were trying to act human, but something wasn't quite right. Their clothes were too clean. Their expressions didn't change. And when they left, his phone stopped working. And so did his radio. In fact, half the town suddenly began reporting interference, TVs fuzzing out, car radios cutting off with bursts of static, strange high-pitched noises playing over the speakers. And then, just as quickly as they came, the government men vanished, but not before issuing a warning to the sheriff. Tell your people to stop looking. If they keep searching, they might not like what they find. What did that mean? Was it a threat, a cover-up, or something worse? No one knew. But the sightings didn't stop. Just 2 nights after the man in black left town, an elderly couple driving home down Route 1 swerved off the road. They claimed they had seen a tall, grey creature standing in the middle of the highway just staring into their headlights. They both described the same thing: glowing pink eyes, grey, rough skin, short arms with 3 claws and 3 thick, jointed legs, ending in feet that weren't shaped like any animal known to man. They'd crashed their car trying to avoid it. But when the police arrived at the scene, there were no skid marks, no signs of impact, no creature, just 3 deep prints burned into the asphalt. Whatever this thing was, it didn't fear being seen anymore. It was stepping into the open. And the message was clear. It wasn't leaving. The underground sounds. By now, Enfield was a town on edge. Schools stayed half empty. Parents walked their kids to the bus stop with rifles slung over their shoulders. The creature, the Enfield monster, had become more than a rumor. It was a living nightmare. But something strange started happening in the days following the highway incident. It began as a low hum, barely noticeable at first, just a faint vibration beneath the floorboards at night. But it grew louder. Farmers reported hearing a strange mechanical buzzing rising from deep beneath their fields, particularly near Henry McDaniel's property and the forest clearing where the search party found the prints. At first they thought it was coming from the old irrigation systems, but the sounds didn't match any equipment. It wasn't water or air or machines. It was something else, something unnatural. Local geologist Dr. Lewis Kendall was brought in from a nearby university. Curious and skeptical, he brought seismic equipment and began testing the area. What he found was deeply unsettling. The vibrations weren't random. They had a pattern, a perfect repeating rhythm, pulsing every 38 seconds. Even more bizarre, the seismic data showed a hollow cavity underground, nearly the size of a football field, located almost directly beneath the site of the strange footprints. But there were no caves in that part of Illinois, no old mines, no natural explanation. Dr. Kendall requested permission to drill a small borehole to investigate the cavity. But just before he could begin, his equipment was confiscated by two unidentified agents. They told him the area was now under federal environmental observation. Kendall protested. He had permits, he had university backing, didn't matter. The men took everything and they left him with a warning. Walk away from this. It's not just your career that's at stake. Meanwhile, residents began reporting a new kind of fear, vibrations in their dreams. Yes, dreams. Several people in town described eerily similar nightmares. Standing in the woods at night, completely alone, while the ground beneath them hummed. The vibrations would start slow and then rise until it felt like their teeth were rattling. In every dream, they saw the creature, standing still, watching, glowing pink eyes piercing through the trees. Sometimes it would walk, sometimes it would leap, but in all the dreams, every single one, the creature was never alone. There were others, shapes in the dark, shadows with eyes, dozens, maybe hundreds, and all of them humming with the same pulse, the same vibration. Whatever was beneath Enfield, it wasn't just a monster. It was something deeper, something older, and it was waking up. The man who vanished. By the end of May 1973, Enfield wasn't just afraid, it was unraveling. Families quietly packed and left in the middle of the night. Dogs refused to go outside. Radios continued to cut out with bursts of static and screeching tones no one could trace. But it wasn't until someone vanished that everything changed. His name was Calvin Hartley. He was a retired railroad worker, lived alone in a small farmhouse just south of the woods where the original sightings happened. Calvin wasn't the kind of man who scared easy. He was a hunter, a veteran, and a skeptic. He'd laughed at the townsfolk, called it all superstitious junk, until one night he went missing. Neighbors noticed his porch light still on at sunrise, his old truck still parked in the driveway, but his front door left wide open. Inside, nothing was stolen, nothing broken, but the kitchen table was flipped over and a single streak of what appeared to be grayish-green fluid ran along the floorboards toward the back door. That wasn't the strangest part. Just outside Calvin's back door, pressed into the soft soil, were footprints, not human, not even close. Three-toed, with wide heel pads and measuring nearly 18 inches long. The same kind found near Henry McDaniel's house, but this time the prints formed a circle around a patch of dead grass, as if something had stood there for a long, long time. The sheriff tried to calm the town, said maybe Calvin wandered off, maybe he hit his head, maybe the fluid was paint or chemicals or something else. But a group of local boys who'd gone searching through the woods the next evening found something that shut everyone up. About a mile into the forest, just past the dry creek bed, they found Calvin's wallet neatly placed on a rock, still full of cash, ID untouched, and lying beside it, a single boot. But here's the part they couldn't explain. There were no footprints leading to or from the spot. No drag marks, no scuffle. Just the boot, the wallet, and the silence. Authorities cordoned off the area, but by then it was too late. Word had spread, and panic followed. Locals started forming armed patrols, driving the back roads with spotlights and rifles, desperate to catch the thing that had taken Calvin. They didn't trust the government anymore, didn't trust the police. Something had taken one of their own, and now it was personal. But while the town looked into the woods, they ignored the one place they should have watched more carefully: the sky. Because the night after Calvin vanished, multiple residents across Enfield saw strange lights overhead. red, pulsating orbs that hovered low over the fields, completely silent. Not aircraft, not flares. These things moved like they were alive, darting, weaving, disappearing instantly when spotted. One man even swore he saw a light beam descend into the woods, just like a spotlight, but it didn't illuminate anything. It just passed through the trees, vanishing into the earth, like it was being pulled by something below. And then the dreams came back, stronger. Now, people weren't just seeing the creature, they were hearing it, whispers, echoes, voices they couldn't understand but somehow recognized. Voices that didn't come from their own minds, but from beneath them, as if the earth itself was trying to speak. And every night, one phrase kept returning to them, a phrase no one could explain, yet they all understood. It remembers. Whatever it was, whatever had come to Enfield, wasn't just an alien or a monster. It was a presence, ancient, observing, waiting, and now it was starting to act. The thing beneath the fields. The last days of May brought no peace to Enfield, only a deeper, more paralyzing fear. It no longer felt like a small town dealing with strange sightings. It felt like a place under siege by something no one could see, understand, or stop. Every night brought new reports. Every morning brought new damage. Chickens gone, barn doors torn off, cows mutilated in eerie silence with not a single drop of blood left behind. But then something changed, not outside, underground. A family of five, the Westbrooks, lived about 4 miles outside of town, near the edge of an old soybean field. On the morning of June 1st, their son Mason ran inside screaming, not because he saw the creature, but because the ground collapsed beneath his feet. When the sheriff and local workers arrived, they found a perfectly circular hole, nearly 10 feet wide and over 30 feet deep, sunk straight into the earth. There were no roots, no stones, no natural structure at all. The dirt was powder soft, and the walls of the hole were smooth as glass, like something had burned or melted its way downward. But the deeper mystery came when they lowered a camera into the hole. For the first 10 feet, they saw nothing, just blackness. Then movement, a brief glimpse of something shifting in the dark, something reflective, not metal, but wet, alive. And then the camera shut off, not broke, not disconnected. It was as if the power had been drained out of it. The sheriff demanded the hole be filled, called in a construction team. But before they could pour the concrete, two black SUVs arrived. Once again, the men in suits came. They sealed off the area and warned the Westbrooks not to speak of the incident. The sheriff was told that the sinkhole was the result of old mining activity, but there had never been mining in that region. Later that night, after the men left, the Westbrooks' house began to vibrate. Not the walls, the floorboards, from beneath. Mrs. Westbrook swore she heard a sound coming through the basement concrete, like whispers in water, gurgling voices, speaking in a language that didn't belong to this world. And her husband? He went downstairs with a flashlight. He didn't find a creature. He didn't find cracks in the walls. What he found was symbols, burned into the concrete, thin, jagged lines that spiraled into one another. Some looked like eyes, others looked like claws. All of them pulsed faintly, with a dull red light fading in and out like a heartbeat. The family fled that night and never returned. And as news of the hole spread, despite the government trying to bury it, other residents came forward. They'd seen strange red patches of earth in their own fields, circles where the grass wouldn't grow, trees that died in perfect rings. One farmer found his tractor melted in half, like it had been exposed to a blast furnace, but nothing else nearby was even scorched. No fire, no smell, no smoke. Scientists from out of state came to investigate but were blocked by federal agents. And late one night, a radio station out of Mount Vernon tried to air a call in show about the Enfield monster. The host was mid sentence when the signal was interrupted by a sound no one could trace, a deep, layered tone that made listeners' ears ache. It went on for 22 seconds, and when it stopped, the station went off the air for 3 full hours. Listeners described the sound as something between a foghorn and a voice, like the ocean trying to speak, like the world was holding its breath. After that, no one wanted to talk about the monster anymore. Not on the news, not in the papers, not even in church, but the hole in the field, it was still there, covered with steel plates, guarded by men with no name tags and no smiles. And late at night, you could still feel it if you stood nearby. A faint pulse, a soft vibration, like something beneath the fields of Enfield was waiting to rise again. The signal. By the second week of June, Enfield was no longer just a quiet Illinois town. It had become a black zone, a place locals didn't speak about and outsiders were warned to avoid. The roads were strangely empty after dark. People nailed shut their cellar doors. Church attendance dropped. Teachers stopped assigning homework. The whole town felt like it was waiting for something to happen. Again. And then it did. The signal came. Not through the radios, not through television, it came through the sky. At exactly 3:17 a.m. on a clear Wednesday morning, residents within a 10-mile radius of Enfield witnessed an event that would be scrubbed from newspapers, denied by authorities, and dismissed as hysteria. The sky opened above the Westbrook farm. Yes, the same farm where the circular hole had been found. There appeared a light unlike any the town had ever seen. Not a beam, not a flash, but a ring, a giant, perfectly circular band of red and violet light rotating silently in the air like the lens of some invisible eye. It pulsed slowly once, twice, 3 times, and then from its center came a sound, not loud, not painful, but impossible. It was like listening to 1,000 voices, whispering in unison, speaking words no one recognized, and yet everyone felt them. The sensation was overwhelming, like someone had reached into the base of your spine and pulled your consciousness forward. And for those who watched too long, they saw things. A teenage girl described a vision of endless tunnels made of living bone, stretching below the town like a hive. She said she saw creatures crawling inside them with glowing eyes and arms too long for their bodies. A farmer said he saw the earth, not from space, but from beneath, like he was watching humanity walk across the surface from inside the planet. An elderly woman whispered, "It's not a visitor. It's always been here." And just as suddenly as it began, it ended. The ring blinked out. The sky returned to normal. The stars resumed their place. But the air felt different, heavy, like it had been touched. Within minutes, phones began to ring across Enfield, but not with human voices. A handful of residents who picked up their landlines at 3:45 a.m. claimed to hear a strange click, followed by a slow breathing sound, like something huge was inhaling from the other side of the line. No words, just the breathing, and then a single tone, low, vibrating. It lasted 13 seconds before the call cut. One of the recipients, an older man named Larry Griggs, had a heart attack immediately after hanging up. He survived, but said the tone didn't stop when he put the phone down. He claimed it was still playing inside his head. He said he heard it when he blinked, when he breathed, When he tried to sleep, his final words before slipping into a coma were chilling. The message wasn't in the sound, it was in the silence that followed. In the days that followed, multiple residents left town for good. Some left behind notes saying things like, "The ground's too loud now. There's no time here anymore. It's not finished." And yet, no government statement ever came. No news stations covered the signal. No federal office admitted to seeing the sky open. All footage captured on security cameras or by amateur witnesses, confiscated within 48 hours. But one recording survived. A CB radio operator from a nearby town had left his rig running overnight. The audio he captured was faint, buried in static, but at exactly 3:17 a.m., a strange frequency cut in. A patterned hum, 5 rising tones, one long pause, and a final tone that dropped so low it shook the radio's casing. And in that final tone, beneath it, something whispered. 4 words, barely audible, almost human. "We have always been." The final revelation. By the end of June, Enfield was no longer a place, it was a memory, a fading ghost of something that was never supposed to be uncovered. The skies had quieted, but the pulse beneath the earth had grown louder. The vibrations underfoot had become a constant hum that gnawed at the edges of sanity. More and more residents had left, seeking refuge from the unseen. The town, once full of life, now echoed with emptiness. Buildings that had been homes were abandoned, left to rot. Not a soul lingered after dark, and still something stirred beneath. Henry McDaniel, who had witnessed it all, kept a journal of everything that happened, not for anyone's sake. He did it for his own sanity. But one entry, found by his daughter after his disappearance, was the most chilling of all. It was dated July 3rd, 1973, a mere 3 days before Henry vanished without a trace. The last words he wrote were, "They're here, and they're not what we thought." But Henry had left behind more than just words. His daughter, upon cleaning out his belongings, found an old reel-to-reel recording hidden beneath a loose floorboard in his study. She'd never seen it before. It was marked only with the word "listen." When she played the tape, it was clear. The recording began with a garbled voice, distorted yet familiar. It was Henry. He was speaking to someone who wasn't there. At first, it sounded like a conversation in the dark. Henry's voice was shaking but determined. "I don't know what it is, but it doesn't belong here. Not in this world. Not in ours." The next part was even harder to understand. The audio was faint, crackling, as if something was being recorded from deep underground. The voice on the other end was slow, guttural, like something trying to form words but struggling. "We have always been here. We wait beneath." And then for a moment, just a moment, the sound cut off. Then the sound of breathing, deep, slow, almost mechanical, and the unmistakable sound of something scraping against metal. Henry's voice returned, frantic. "You want to take it all. The land, the people. But what do you need with this? This hollow world beneath us?" A long pause, then a whisper, one final chilling phrase. "You can't stop us. You can't unhear." The recording ended abruptly, and Henry McDaniel vanished that same night. No one saw him go. No trace was found, not a footprint, not a shred of his clothing. It was as if he simply ceased to exist. But the signal was far from over. In the months following Henry's disappearance, the remaining few in Enfield were haunted by one final, terrifying discovery. An old map that had been hidden in the town's archives, buried under layers of official records, buried for decades. It was a map of the town's land, but not just any map. It was an ancient map, one that traced underground channels, ancient systems carved beneath the Earth's surface, leading to the hollow spaces where the creature, the monster, had come from. And according to the map, these spaces were not just caves, they were hives. The townspeople had unknowingly built their homes above these tunnels, tunnels that had once been dormant, waiting for something to stir them, waiting for the right time to rise. This creature, this thing that had terrorized the town for months, was only the tip of what lay beneath. The final terrifying truth: the thing beneath wasn't just one creature, it was a whole race, a species, and Enfield had unknowingly become the threshold, the place where the boundary between worlds was too thin. The creature wasn't an alien invader, it was something ancient, a being from the dawn of time, something that had always existed beneath the earth's surface, waiting, biding its time, and now it was coming, the awakening. The year 1974 came and went, but Enfield was no longer a place that appeared on maps. The town was erased, consumed not by flames or disaster, but by a force far more insidious, something deep, something old, something that could never be forgotten. There were no more reports, no more sightings, no more strange lights in the sky. It was as if the earth had swallowed the entire town whole, hushing it to silence. But that was just the surface. Beneath, everything had changed. In the months that followed the last sighting, a series of earthquakes hit the region. Nothing major at first, just minor tremors, but they were enough to rattle windows and wake people from their sleep. The deeper you looked into the ground, the more you realized the vibrations weren't going away. Scientists who were secretly sent to study the area discovered something terrifying. The core of the earth beneath Enfield, once stable, was now shifting. And it wasn't just a geological occurrence, it was artificial. The ground had been disturbed, the layers of earth and rock tampered with, like something was digging beneath, pushing outward. But no one could explain how or why. Then there was a leak. An anonymous letter, written in a hand that wasn't human, was sent to a government office. It described something vast and unholy deep beneath the earth. The letter spoke of an ancient hive that stretched across multiple states beneath the Midwest. The creatures that had risen from the earth weren't just alien, they were something older, older than humanity itself. They had been lying in wait, watching, and now they were preparing to return to the surface. The world didn't believe it. They couldn't. The reports were dismissed. The monsters were explained away as folklore, a small town's collective nightmare. Nothing more. But some saw the signs. Over the next few years, unusual activity began to increase all around the world. Strange symbols appeared in the most remote places. Whispers of other towns that had been swallowed whole, just like Enfield. Things that shouldn't have been possible. Sudden disappearances. Odd alien-like creatures being sighted in isolated forests. The hum that had been heard in Enfield, it spread. People in far-off places started hearing the vibrations in the soil, feeling them in their bones. A worldwide awakening was slowly taking place, but only a few were brave enough to recognize it for what it was. In a final chilling twist, the last known recording from Enfield was unearthed. It was a video taken by one of the few survivors who had secretly returned to the area to try and uncover the truth. What he recorded was unbelievable. He stood near the now abandoned site of the McDaniel home, staring into the woods. The camera trembled in his hands as he zoomed in on a gaping hole, the same hole that had once led to the underground tunnels. Now it was filled with an unnatural greenish glow. At the very edge of the hole, just barely visible, something moved. a shape tall, thin, with glowing eyes. The camera cut to black, and the video ended with one final message written in faint, shaky handwriting. It remembers us. The footage was confiscated before it could be shared. The man who recorded it was never seen again. And so the Enfield monster became a forgotten myth, a story buried under years of official silence. The world moved on, ignoring the tremors beneath the surface. But in the quiet corners of the earth, there are still whispers, and beneath the soil, in places forgotten by time, there are things that remember, things that wait, and someday soon, they will rise again. The end.